We kick off, I did want to play a little quick video on behalf of Hilton. So once again, thank you Hilton Honors for being our venue sponsor, and they kindly provided a little short clip for some entertainment. So let's have a look at that.
At Hilton, we love that feeling of making things happen, of letting go, that feeling of calm, that I can do anything feeling. The magic of that just arrived feeling, that everything is a new memory feeling, that vacation is on feeling. Book now at Hilton.com. To new memories, Hilton, and our family of brands. At Hilton, let's jump into memories best celebrated together, where a time away means us time, and a goodnight kiss, where reunions become incredible nights, where breakfast is the sweetest part of the day. Let's jump into new memories. Book now at Hilton.com. To new memories, Hilton, and our family of brands.
All right, thank you, and thank you Hilton. So our next session, I'm joined by Scott Hinshaw, who I'm sure many of you know, who's had an esteemed career in loyalty, and I'm very much looking forward to this chat. I think it's going to be fun. But we have a fantastically interesting and curious, if I may use the term, session title for you, and that's How to Benjamin Button Your Loyalty Program. So Scott, maybe we could take a moment to introduce yourself for anyone in the room who doesn't know who you are, and what do we mean when we say Benjamin Button Your Loyalty Program?
Yeah, great to be here. My name's Scott Hinshaw. I spent 20 years at American Airlines. The six final years I was there, I was in the Advantage program on the leadership team, primarily focused on engaging with infrequent customers or infrequent travelers through partnerships and through enrollment and other ways that we would try to engage with what we would call base members of the program. When I left American in 2018, I did a couple of years in a startup initiative focused on loyalty with college-age students. And so that brings a lot of perspective to this topic. I started about a year ago at IBS Software. I've loved being in this role. I get to kind of nerd out on loyalty all day long, and so it's a lot of fun. But I'm also a big movie buff, and so when I was thinking about this topic, and that is essentially what I struggled with in my role at Advantage and what I focused on in this college loyalty endeavor I was involved in, it's this idea of how do you, especially in the airline or hotel program, get a focus on not just infrequent customers, which is what I was focused on at Advantage, but a subset of that customer base, which is millennials or Gen Zs or whatever age group you want to talk about, a younger audience. What strategies, how could a travel loyalty program change and become like Benjamin Button, the character in the movie? If you remember the movie, Benjamin Button was born old. Was born, they first saw this baby, and the baby looks, 85 years old. And throughout the movie, Benjamin Button actually gets younger. And at the end of the movie, he's old, but he looks young. And in my mind, that's a lot like what airline and hotel programs, the struggle or the challenge ahead of them is they tend to focus or have been focusing on people like me, middle-aged men. And how do you, to the extent that it's now desirable in the COVID era, focus on a much younger audience?
It's an interesting point, Scott. And one of my colleagues, many of you know, David Canty, he focuses, he's got a very, very strong, enthusiastic focus on Gen Z. And with Built, absolutely.
Yep.
And he's been raving and ranting about Gen Z for quite some time. Most of us were still ranting and raving about millennials. He was already worrying about Gen Z. Some people will say that this whole focus on, generational shift and differences in generations, some people would argue it's a distraction, in the sense that, the new generations, the same as the current generation, the same as the old generation, everybody values value. They want the perceived benefits. There has to be some attractiveness in whatever it is that you're offering, whether it's a product or a program or a currency, and they have to perceive value in it, something in it for them that they can relate to, has to be relevant. All of these sort of core check boxes, if you will, that really apply to previous generations as well. And it occurs to me, listening to the previous panel, that one of the things we've really seen come through in the last 18 months, and I know folks like yourself and myself and others in the room have been banging on about this for a long time before the pandemic, but it seems to have become mainstream now, is airlines don't have a choice, and hotels, but let's focus on airlines for a second, don't really have a choice. They have to focus on a different type of customer that's flying now, because their traditional middle-aged business traveler, McKinsey consultant isn't traveling right now. So my first question to you is we talk about focusing on the younger generation. Is it the same or different, or maybe I'll phrase it differently, is there a crossover between the need to focus on the new generations and also to change our focus to the more infrequent or leisure or self-funded traveler? Is there a crossover between those two?
Well, certainly there is a crossover. A lot of infrequent travelers are millennials, and I would say almost all of the younger generation are infrequent travelers. But the way I like to think about it is certainly there are strategies that apply to both infrequent travelers and younger travelers both. But there are some unique things about the younger audience that if you are looking at Benjamin buttoning your loyalty program, that you should know, and things that you should weave into your program. I'm not suggesting that Hilton Honors or Aeroplan should completely change their program and be 100% focused on a younger audience. But those programs that do focus 100% on a younger audience look completely different than their traditional airline or hotel loyalty program. And so what can we learn from when we look at programs that specifically focus on this audience that we could incorporate into our older programs that have been around for a long time?
One of the things, again, that came through the previous panel was this concept of friction.
Yep.
We make things difficult. Programs are complicated. There's lots of rules. We devalue. We really shoot ourselves in the foot a lot.
Yep.
And then we wonder why we struggle to get people to enroll. It's like, well, why don't you want to become a member? Why don't you want to co-brand? Why don't you want to stay or fly with us more frequently or spend more money? Why don't you want to consolidate your share of wallet with us? So this concept of, what are some of the ways that programs really make it difficult for themselves, where they put hurdles in front of a seamless customer experience?
So the first thing that I would emphasize is, for a younger person, these programs are more about a relationship than maybe what those of us who are older realize. And when you're in a relationship with somebody, you know things about that person, and you use the things that you know about them to make that relationship better and stronger. And that's kind of a shift in mindset that I think we have to have in order to really engage with these people. So in the ebook that we published yesterday that's on this topic, the first two elements that I suggest that you focus on are both around friction. One is you have to make your program a lot easier to join. And Mark talked about it up here earlier. This was something I focused on when I was at Advantage to some success, and I'm happy to see a lot of things that I was championing years ago are coming to fruition now. But we make joining our programs much, much too difficult. And when you're someone who's 20 to 30 years old, it makes zero sense, because the world they live in, joining whatever it is, whether it's Snapchat or Starbucks or whatever they're engaged in, is generally a one-click endeavor, or enter one or two things. I spent a lot of time looking at airline loyalty program enrollment forms. Most airline loyalty programs ask for somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 required fields to join your program. And that makes zero sense to a Gen Z or millennial person. But also just around general friction. I think a shift in mindset is that removing friction is actually part of the loyalty proposition. Think beyond miles and points and seat rewards or room rewards. removing the friction itself is part of being in the loyalty relationship with somebody. And what might that look like? Well, it's just simple things. And airlines are starting to take first steps. So for instance, American finally added a benefit for base membership of some level of priority boarding. That's removing some friction in the boarding process by saying, hey, we're in a relationship. Let me recognize that we're in a relationship and make that experience better for you. Is it all the way? No, it's certainly a lot.
That was a big step for America, though. I mean, basically, the point is you could be standing in the gate, and you get on your
That's
phone,
right.
you join the program, and I mean, you may have to get your boarding pass reissued if you've already checked in, but the point is you'll now have a higher priority boarding group now.
That's right.
It's not as high as others, but it's an instant benefit that costs $0, and it's something that you can deliver to people. Well, American can deliver to people right now just for signing up. It's an immediate benefit. I mean, we talk, how many years have we all been going to these conferences and we talk about experiences and, immediate rewards, and we always sometimes think that that's some useless gift card to some third party, but really we can do something in-house, and that's a great example. Quick question if I can. Hands up, who joins multiple programs that you don't necessarily care about just because, it's your job to know loyalty? So you check out, yeah. I mean, I've developed a new litmus test recently, and that is if I, of all people, I'm only up here because I live and breathe loyalty. Most of us are in the room for this same reason. With the exception of Mark Nasser, I'm probably up there with the top 3 geeks in the room. The reality is if I can't be bothered joining your program, there's something wrong. I go to Taco Bell, I can't be bothered signing up to that program. Too much effort. El Polo Loco, I can't be bothered signing up to that. It's too much effort. What am I going to get for it? Now, if you told me I'm going to get 50% off tacos for the first month that I sign up, well, you know what? Maybe I'll do that. Am I going to get a free quesadilla for signing up? Great, maybe I'll do that. I don't even know if that maybe that's a benefit. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I probably get maybe twice a month at Taco Bell. That's frequent enough that I should join, but it's irrelevant to me. It's interesting what you say about removing friction, because I think back quite a number of years ago, and people would say to me, what's the value of elite status? And my answer would be the same all the time. It's not about upgrades. It's not about your free bags. It's not anything about that, although all of those things do reduce friction. It's about, I touched on this earlier, when something goes wrong, you're going to get looked after better. So, yeah, to some degree maybe you can say it is about free bags, because the travel experience isn't fun when you're down the back of the bus. It's grueling. And that's even pre-pandemic. And status removes a lot of those friction points. So let me sort of take on what you've said so far. I mean, we talk about reducing friction. This is always a common theme in our discussions. Make enrollment easier. Make it relevant, to my point just now, that you actually are interested in signing up for the program. What else that might be, bringing it back to this generational shift discussion, what else would you throw in the mix there?
Well, I guess I'm going to move beyond just removing friction. The younger generation, and I experienced this when I was working on this college program that I was creating, it's amazing how that the rewards that they're looking for might be very different than what an older generation is thinking. And we're all thinking it's all about flight rewards, hotel room rewards. The younger generation, actually, if you go and research it, they're very interested in things that are social. Right? And so a lot of the rewards that when you look at programs that are specifically designed for a younger generation may not actually have a cost to you. And I've heard the pushback from people like, we don't want to create a travel rewards program that's all about badges and those types of things. But you could certainly incorporate some of that into your program because that is what this generation is familiar with and used to. And not just the type of reward, but also the ability to share their engagement with the program with their friends. We don't do a great job in travel loyalty of people being able to share their engagement in the travel loyalty ecosystem on social media. So there's different points here around the rewards themselves might look different for a younger person, but also how you engage with the program probably needs to be more gamified and much more on these things. 68% of younger people, millennials and Gen Zs, think this is the most important thing that they own. That's a McKinsey study.
Only 68?
Only 68. Now, if I look at I have 3 kids that are between 19 and 22, and it's probably, no doubt, the most important thing they own. And if you look at them, they all, like, I was with a bunch of college kids the other day, and every one of them, their screens were cracked, and it was really interesting because they just use these things like way more than we do, and I think I live on them. And so another thing that I think is really important if you're thinking about Benjamin buttoning your loyalty program is how do you get more mobile? Because honestly, travel loyalty has largely been given a second seat to the airline or the hotel operational needs on the mobile devices. I know at American, it was a really big struggle to try to get any presence for AAdvantage on the AA app, and it's not much better today because the view of the company is that the AA app is around day of departure operational needs. And that is a very middle-aged, frequent customer viewpoint. If you want to engage with a younger audience, you've got to get more social, more mobile, and your rewards need to be more relevant to them. Another interesting fact is a lot of the things that younger people value in rewards are actually the ability to donate your points or your miles to a cause. And a lot of programs have this, but again, make it really good and then make it something that people can share. I think the ability to share on mobile and social programs and devices and platforms is hugely important if you want to Benjamin button your loyalty program.
You know, it's funny you talk about the social sharing, and I think that, I don't want to, John's out of the room, I can say this, but, I think it's fair to say that Marriott is not SPG. And I mean, I think that they would be man enough to stand up and admit that as well.
Sure.
But if we think back 10, 15 years, I think back to, hashtag SPG Life. I mean, everyone remembers that, right? SPG was 10 years ahead of the game. Before Instagram became the thing, that was the thing. And people did share it. And probably the people that shared it the most were the less frequent travelers who were really, really happy to redeem some points to stay in a nice, on a honeymoon or a family vacation or whatever it might have been. It was dare I say, it was a social status signal. I think regular business travelers were too busy to worry about what's this Instagram thing, but they did it really well, and it's almost noteworthy. I think it is noteworthy that since then, no one has really. You can say maybe World of Hyatt has tried to position, but we've had attempts, but it's failed miserably. Interestingly about mobile, and I read the ebook last night, and one of the points you make in it, I wanted to maybe challenge you on a little bit, was you say the mobile app, and I take your point where you just said about AA, that loyalty programs should perhaps have their own independent app. Can I get you to flesh that out a little?
Yeah, so if you look at most loyalty programs, when they're completely spun off, they typically have their own website, their own mobile presence. But when you're part of the larger travel company, airline or hotel, typically the loyalty program doesn't have its own existence. And so I guess there's a lot of inertia there. It's going to be difficult if that's a strategy you're going to try to go and achieve at your airline or hotel. But isn't that what we've just learned through the pandemic, is that loyalty is so valuable and so important that maybe it should have its own place for everyday engagement. Because by definition, by the teams that lead those strategies around mobile at the airline or the hotel, they're focused on day of departure. Yet the loyalty side is now trying to focus on everyday engagement. So you've got to figure out how to have a separate presence. And I'm no expert on digital strategy here. There might be a way to have this be part of the airline or hotel, bigger app. But you've got to carve out a presence for people to engage much, much more frequently. Because I think if I had to kind of summarize what is one of the biggest points for a younger audience, it's the velocity or the frequency of engagement that they're starving for that doesn't typically exist in travel loyalty. People just don't travel enough, especially this audience. So you've got to figure out a way to amp up the frequency and level of engagement, and that's probably not going to happen if you're just part of the airline or the hotel mobile existence.
Who thinks the way to ramp up engagement is to send more emails? Is anyone having open rates that they're proud enough to want to share?
I can tell you this, when I was doing this college thing, I learned that college-age students do not open emails. They do not read emails. It was very frustrating because I'm a middle-aged man. I'm like, oh, we'll send them emails. And I would just even try to communicate with individual people. Hey, you won this award. They wouldn't answer their emails. What they would answer is a direct message on Instagram. I mean, I could get their attention like that with a DM on Instagram. And so that was very eye-opening to me. Is email was just not relevant to them. They have way more unanswered emails than what are in my inbox. They just don't read them.
I know, I saw your phone earlier. It's embarrassing. I thought I was bad. I'm going to take it nobody has email open rates they're proud enough to share. Who thinks the answer is to send more app notifications? Maybe? Yeah? What's your baseline app notification rate now? How many do you send per week? Yeah, I had a program that I was speaking to recently. They decided finally after years to increase their app notifications. I was getting 4 a week. I told them that you're lucky that it was me because probably half the membership's deleted the app by now. So it's useless. I mean, those traditional ideas that we had as middle-aged men, dare I say, doesn't work anymore. But just on the separate app, and I know you sort of qualified the comment, you know, when I look at things like Virgin Australia with Velocity, before they brought it back in-house, and they had it's a good example I'm very familiar with the separate app. And I've got to say, I think it introduces more friction because now you have 2 apps. You have one app to handle your check-ins and operational needs and things like that. You have another app for how many status credits do I have? What's my points activity? What are my offers to earn some more points on the ground? And actually they had a third app, which was the entertainment app. So to me, now we've got too many apps on the phone. So I take your point that it's an interesting challenge. We have to solve it, and obviously.
And that's exactly what the digital strategy people at the airline or the hotel will say. Yeah. And it may not be that the answer is another app. I think mobile for this generation might be more around social media. And typically, we older people are one social media platform too late. So they're not on Facebook. I think most of us know that by now. We go, oh, they're not on Facebook. They're increasingly moving, I think, away from even Instagram. And you're getting into, I think there's one called, and I'm going to sound old when I say this because I'm going to get it wrong, Yik Yak is one that I'm hearing about. Like, there's just always a new social platform, and I know that's challenging for us to keep up. But I think the way to engage with a younger audience, should that be a strategy of yours, is probably more around mobile, around social, than necessarily in an app.
Yeah, it's a good point. And just to pick up on just to sort of finish up, if you don't mind me going here and tell me if I'm talking out of school, we can certainly skip over it. When we talk about on-the-ground engagement, particularly for less frequent travelers, let's stick in the travel space. And as you noted, younger generation generally are less, they're not the McKinsey consultants flying 5 days a week. We've had this everyday earn and burn proposition, or particularly earn proposition, with some programs. US programs have really been laggards in this, but if we look at Aeroplan, for example, Qantas Frequent Flyer, Lufthansa Miles and More, Asia Miles, we look around the world, there's plenty of examples of on-the-ground earning ability. But one of the things that's always been siloed away has been elite status earn, and the traditional thinking has always been that status is only relevant for real frequent bum and seat flyers. And there's definitely a school of thought that subscribes to the fact that the only way you should ever earn status is bum and seat flying. There's no shortcuts, no anything like that. I remember a few years ago, I was sitting in the office in Sydney with Carl Schuster, who's just been announced as the Chief Loyalty Officer at WestJet. That's an interesting topic we'll talk about later on. I think it's a fantastic development. Very smart, one of the smartest people in loyalty, Carl Schuster. I know probably many of you know him as well. And he said to me straight out that they'd introduced some credit cards where, as part of the sign-up acquisition bonus, you got a contribution to status credits. And he asked what I thought about it, and I said, I think it's great. I said, I think if you said that you could earn your status completely on the ground with no flying component, that's a different conversation, a different question. I think it's more complicated. But I have absolutely no problem. What you're doing is, I said to him at the time, what you're doing is encouraging people to engage in the wider ecosystem. The deeper they're engaged in your brand, the better the chance you're going to have better overall loyalty, engagement, share of wallet, and whatever your other core metrics are. Your former employer, obviously, a lot of time in the making to come to this. Recently, American Advantage, for those that might not be aware, recently just announced as of next year, complete overhaul of the elite status earn side of the program, in that now it doesn't matter whether you earn your elite status from flying or from co-brand spend or from going through the shopping or the dining portal. All of those points earning will count towards your status earn, although there are some additional things like upgrade certificates that you only get from flying. Quick thoughts, if we're not talking out of school?
No, you're not.
Quick thoughts on that, given your previous insights.
I love it, and I'd love to say that I was the one that started this. I'm sure there were people before me that were beating this drum, and I was certainly beating it when I was there, and so glad to hear that finally, the recognition is that revenue is revenue, and you've got to figure out a way to adjust for what the margin is on selling a mile or a point, and have it be simple enough that the customer can understand it. But I like what they've done, and there's also an interesting element to this that I think a lot of people within the industry are certainly thinking about, but maybe outside the industry they're not really thinking so much about, and that is, to the extent that people will value in-flight benefits who are not flying that much, it's kind of genius. If you can get people to say, oh, I'm going to go strive for an award that I'm really not going to consume very often.
At low cost.
Right. Now, do they have the exact right thresholds? I think that was probably the scariest part of the whole launch, and I wasn't there for it, but I bet you there was a ton of analysis on, right now they're saying 200,000 loyalty points get you executive platinum. And theoretically, and I was talking to someone earlier who thinks they can get there 100% on credit card spend, that's a great example of that's revenue to the airline. That's probably more revenue to the airline than many of the flying people who were achieving executive platinum before. Yet that gentleman, by definition, is not consuming the benefits that he's trying to go earn.
It's a good point, because the translation is, just in layman's terms, is to get executive platinum, which is the top status with American. Now, by purely flying, you have to have $18,000 pre-tax spend on airline flying, or you could simply get it by $200,000 spend on the co-brand. And it's an interesting analysis of the financials. In many cases, every case is going to be different, but in many cases, the airline actually may make higher margin in the nominal figures on the credit card spender than on the flyer. Right. The flyer is consuming every flight they're getting. They're consuming things that there are a cost attributed to, whereas the on-the-ground person only incurs any sort of cost when they do fly. It's interesting.
And the other thing I love about this is, when I first started at American in 1998, we would recruit new people to come to American. We would talk about how innovative American was. The reality is, at least on the Advantage side, we hadn't been terribly innovative in a long time. We would typically wait and see what Delta or United would do and follow. And so American is leading this time, which is fun to see. It's also very scary, because when you're leading, if you get it wrong, and you may find out next year, and you talked about something earlier about a strategy that had to go back and be adjusted. In normal times, if you were to lose significant share of elite customers, it could be fatal. Probably less risk right now, but still, it's a very scary position to be in. That what if a lot of people are doing the mental calculation who had been flying a lot and say, I don't know. Because the reality is, if you were just barely reaching, say, executive platinum, the request now is that you have to keep doing what you've been doing and spend and more, right? And so that's going to be the interesting, the reaction from the competitors, and then watch and see if you see promotional efforts to basically correct for having those thresholds maybe not quite right.
you so much.
you.
I'm sure if anyone has questions, they can buttonhole you.
Yes.
Use the pun over coffee break. We're going to break for coffee, tea, bathroom, all that kind of business now. We're going to have a 20-minute break, so we will come back at 11:15, 11:15. We will kick off with the next panel. Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you, everyone.